Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, and we're going to be providing a general market outlook. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, I'm not going to make this a very long video. I imagine most of you already know my thoughts anyways, but I do just want to provide an update because, the weeks have gone by and, prices have slowly changed some. And so why not provide at least a update on the price of ETH? Um, in general, as we discussed previously, the second half of the pre-halving year is likely not going to be that kind to ETH, just like it wasn't last cycle. And, until proven otherwise, I'm just going to assume that this time is not any different, you know? Um, with that said, I think it's important that we recognize that it is a stochastic process, right? I mean, the journey back down in the second half of the pre-halving year over here was filled with moves back up to the upside that ultimately just resulted in lower highs, right? We had a high and then we had a lower high again in September, a lower high again in November. And we actually got a higher high in the halving year, followed by another lower low thanks to the recession brought on by the pandemic. Now, I will say my general expectation is that we put in lower highs, okay? So that doesn't mean that Ethereum can't at all move back up, right? I mean, it probably will throughout the pre-halving year at various phases, but the general direction should be down. Okay, the general direction should be down. With that said, we're now looking at 4 red candles in a row, assuming this one closes red. So again, in line with the idea that it's a stochastic process, we should assume that at some point there will be some form of relief. That's not to say that it has to happen tomorrow or anything, but it could. It's just to say whenever the relief comes, the general expectation would be that the bull market support band holds resistance. Okay, that would be my general expectation. And for ETH, that range is now from 1763 to 1813. Okay, that's where it currently ranges from, 1763 to 1813. So as this comes down throughout the next 3 to 4 months, we likely will have some moves back up to it at various points, right? And during those times, the expectation that I would have, not financial advice, of course, but the expectation that I would have is that it would be rejected by either the 21-week EMA, the 20-week SMA, or some average thereof. Okay? When you look at seasonality for ETH, this is what the 2023 year-to-date ROI looks like, the purple line. 2019 is the green line. And you can see that 2019 went up for the first half of the year and then went down for the second half of the year. This time, ETH, it kind of went up through April and then it's just sort of faded here. I do expect that ETH will slowly fade into the end of the year. And again, that doesn't mean that we can't have moves back up. I'm sure there will be some, right? Just to bring people back in. But that is, I think, what the general expectation should be. And again, I mean, in 2019, there were some brutal rallies that took you back up, but they all resulted in lower highs. Okay, that's sort of the more important aspect to remember. The other thing to remember is that in 2019, and I expect 2023 could be the case as well, that ETH closed below the yearly open, even though Bitcoin didn't. Right? Bitcoin in 2019 closed above its yearly open, almost 2x, in fact. But Ethereum did not, right? Ethereum closed about a few percent below its yearly open, and at one point it went about 10% below the yearly open by the end of the year. The yearly open for ETH is around what I think 1195. So it should not be surprising if ETH closes the year below 1195. That doesn't mean that it has to happen. Ethereum today is at 1630. But I would expect that by the end of the year, if we're not below the yearly open, we'll at least be a lot closer to it than we are today. So again, good chance that ETH closes the year below its yearly open of 1195, and if it doesn't, I doubt it would miss it by very much. Is what I would assume. This is the year-to-date ROI. If you look at monthly returns for ETH in pre-halving years for Bitcoin, you can see that last pre-halving year, July, August, and September were red. So far, July was red and August was red, and now we're in September, which so far is red, but we still have a long way to go in September. And you can see that in Q4, 2 of the 3 months were red, right? So 2 of the 3 months were red. October was green, and then November, December were red. So kind of like I said with Bitcoin, I think there's a good chance that out of September, October, November, and December, one of those months will be green for ETH. The rest will probably be red, right? That's my expectation, is that one of those 4 months would be green, and then the rest would actually be red. And I mean, look, it's not, I read the comments. People are like, well, why do you have to be such a downer about this stuff? Again, it's not that I want to be. It's just that this is what my own experience has taught me. This is what the data suggests, and I have to stay true to that. I know a lot of people don't like my view on altcoins. They haven't for the last 20 months or so, but it hasn't been the wrong view. Total 3, the altcoin market is at a market cap of 321 billion. And that's including the fact that they added another 10 to 15 billion to the definition of total 3, And look at where it is. It has not been wrong to be bearish on the altcoin market. It just simply hasn't. And even that the day that I make this video, there's some altcoins putting in new lows, right? Avalanche putting in new lows right now. So it has not been the wrong view. So please do not mistake sort of my lackluster view on the market for the rest of the year to just be, just to try to bring people down. It's not the case. It's just, this is what I expect based on the macro environment, based on cyclical behavior in the cryptoverse, based on my own experience. This is just what I expect. I could be wrong. And if I am, there'll be plenty of people to let me know, but that's what I expect. And so we'll see, we'll see what happens here with ETH. There are a couple of things, I think to sort of bear in mind, for at least sort of some events to keep in mind that are upcoming here. One thing to note here that we talked about before is we do have a death cross coming up for Bitcoin, and just as sort of a warning, in 2019 when the death cross came for Bitcoin, ETH actually got this pump back up into the bull market support band sometime, around that death cross. And also note that ETH got a small little pump on its own death cross. Okay, like a little pump into its own death cross, fade, and then a more substantial pump came later when Bitcoin got its death cross. And then it still faded and put in a new low, right? So that's why I say, right, I mean, at some point, there'll likely be some type of move back up sometime the next, several weeks. But I would expect it to be a lower high that would still result in a lower low, right? It's all about positioning. These moves, when you live through them, you think there are a lot of people that lived through this and everyone just said, oh yeah, it's just going to be a lower high? No. A lot of people thought this was going to just take us back up to these highs or this one. And it was just a lower high. And when you live through it, it feels different than when you look at it on a chart 4 years later, right? It feels a lot different. I mean, if we were to experience a move like this, again, everyone will lose their collective mind again. So just be aware. And by the way, I mean, when you look at it, let me just pull it up on a different chart. If we just pull it up for Bitcoin, that death cross that Bitcoin had back in 2019, it occurred right here, right? So that's when Bitcoin had that death cross. But here's the caveat to it. That pump only occurred after Bitcoin took out the prior low. So there's so many similarities And I just want you to take a look at this, right? In 2019, Bitcoin faded, but it did not immediately put in a new low, right? You can see that it held above the low for a long time. In fact, for a long time, it held above the prior low. But during that same time, Ethereum was not holding above these prior lows, right? Like if you were to look at this low here from June, ETH had already taken it out in July, right? ETH had already taken it out. This low for ETH in June, guess when ETH took it out? In August, right? Not July, but it was in August. ETH already took it out. But with Bitcoin back then, the June low was not taken out in August. It didn't get taken out until October. It took longer. Just like today, if you go look at Bitcoin, it hasn't taken out its June low yet. But Ether already has. It already has. So I would, and you can also see we're coming in on a death cross again, right? There's a lot of similarities, right? We're coming in here on a death cross. So what I would be looking for, in the short term would be, you could of course get a, some type of a move up once you get the death cross, but any type of move up, I would expect to be a lower high. That's the important point, is that any types of these moves would be a lower high. And back in 2019, when Bitcoin got that move, it only came after it took out this low, right? So I would be looking for Bitcoin to take out 24.8, so to drop another $1,000 or so, at some point. And then after it does that, maybe it gets some type of relief. And the relief could come without getting that. I mean, again, last cycle, Bitcoin did not take out the June low until October. So there's some precedent to say maybe it'll be stubborn for another month. But in any case, right? In any case, Ethereum would likely result in lower highs for the rest of the year. Okay? That is the expectation. You can see that last cycle, once ETH got into this downtrend that started in June, we didn't stop putting in lower lows until December. December was the last lower low before we got a rally that put in a higher high. Okay? So the way I'm sort of going into this, into the next like 3 to 4 months, is my expectation is that everything that happens with ETH will likely result in a lower high. Okay? So I'm guessing that you have, so you have this high here in April, right? You have sort of this double top that occurred. Right? You have the top here and then more or less like a double top here. And then you sort of have this kind of a lower high. I don't know how significant this one is. I mean, sometimes you sort of get intermediate highs that aren't as important. But I would not expect ETH to take out, this prior high over here. Not this year, anyways. Maybe it does next year, but I don't think it will this year. So I would be on the lookout for Ethereum to continue this pattern for the rest of the year, a series of lower highs and lower lows. And you can already see that they're deforming, right? I mean, there's been already several lower highs, and we've already put in, some lower lows here, right? I mean, you went to 1750, and then 1620, and then 1510. So that's sort of my expectation, is that it's just a series of lower highs and lower lows for Ether for the rest of the year that could very well cause Ether to end the year below its yearly open of 1195. Now, for Ethereum to end the year below 1195, it would mean from this level dropping another 26, 27%. Okay? At least. So there's reason to believe that ETH could drop, another 30% before the end of the year. And it'd be in line with what we saw last year and in line with general expectations, right? I also look at this, I mean, you look at these weekly candles and you sort of zoom out and you can kind of see where we are, right? Like look at it with respect to the 20-week SMA, the bull market support band, and the 50-week moving average. Does it not seem like we're just kind of like right here? That's where we are. I don't think it plays out the exact same way, but it might be similar. right? Where you have, I'm trying to find something that shows up pretty well. Just go back to yellow. So you have this squeeze, sort of like below the bull market support band and mostly above the 50 week with some action here below it. And then eventually it breaks down. I kind of think that's where we are now, right? Like we're sort of in between, right? We're below the bull market support band, but we're above the 50-week SMA. So that, I believe, is where I think is where we currently are, sort of in this cycle. So I think that whether you're in the camp of Ethereum sees new lows, or whether you're in the camp of the lows are already in. I mean, I think that either scenario, there's still a good chance that Ether just sort of fades for the rest of the year, right? Through December, and then maybe there'll be some renewed interest in the early part of the halving year. I don't know, but I imagine that you will see relatively lackluster price action for Ether for the rest of the year, and mostly just a series of lower lows and lower highs. If you actually look at Ethereum as measured from the peak, so I want to look at it as measured from the peak and take it out sort of to where we are. Like this is kind of where we are in terms of seasonality, right? In terms of measuring it from one peak until say at the bottom or something, or the end of the secondary scare. This is where we currently are. So we're definitely not in favorable seasonality for ETH, right? This is kind of the season where it tends to fade back down. So that's what I'm looking at here. A lot of these different metrics would suggest that Ethereum fades for the rest of the year, with some occasional moves back up to the bull market support band just to keep people on their toes. Okay? So that's where I would argue we are right now. And there's also some other ways that you can look at this in terms of support levels, right? So if you're looking at this on a log scale, you can kind of see that we're sort of coming into this, support area, right? I mean, you could already argue that we've already wicked to it here. And this support is in that 15 to 1600 range, right? 15 to 1600. And so if Bitcoin bounces or it gets any type of relief, then yeah, like this might still hold for a bit, but I would argue that eventually it will fade and we will fall below it. If you look at sort of the seasonality here, right? ETH fell below this sort of in the summer of 22. The summer of 22, ETH fell below right here. I mean, approximately. It was May, so it was really before summer started. I think that we'll eventually fall below this sort of in the summer of 2023, maybe slightly after the summer of 2023, or could be now. I mean, it's still technically summer, so if it were to occur between now and the 21st of September, then arguably it is still summer. But we saw that same pattern, over here, right? Where you have sort of these trend lines that ETH is riding up only for it to break down below it sort of in the summer, right? This was July and this was August. So the trend lines eventually broke and we went lower in both the bear market year and the pre-halving year. And so I think that Ether will break below this trend line and sort of come into this area over here. And hopefully return home. Wouldn't that be nice? Right? Back to the lower fair value logarithmic regression trend line, which I ultimately do think is where it's going to go. Just to get back in the regression band, just to get back into the upper part of the regression band, we need to go below 1382 at the current time. So below 1382, which coincidentally, if you sort of draw the same trend line on a linear scale, if we were to draw this on a linear scale, that's still right above it, right? It's right above that regression line. So you might even see a scenario here where Ether sort of falls back into 13 to 1400. Let's say by the end of October, sometime between now and the end of October, between 13 to 1400, holds there for a little bit, and then you get the final plunge, and then you move back up in sort of the next phase of QE and all the good things that come with that. That's sort of where I think we are right now with ETH. And it's funny because I feel like the Bulls and the Bears have sort of squabbled here for quite a long period of time. But in reality, Ethereum has been in a pretty well-defined range. And, one thing that we've mentioned that a lot of times these cryptocurrencies like to do is they like to set a high, set a low, and then set a high. And then what often they do is they like to sweep the high and then sweep the low. So, sort of my expectations for the next 3 to 6 months would be for Ethereum to ultimately come back down and sweep these lows. And yes, it could be a lower low. Okay. I know it's not I know a lot of people don't like that. I say that. And I'll say, I mean, it might not be, right? It might not be a lower low, but there's a good chance it will be a lower low. And it might not be a much lower low, right? I mean, maybe it just goes down to just below 800. It could go lower. It could go to 600 or something, 400, 500, 600. But that is it's in the cards. It's in the cards for ETH, right? I mean, you could have a move in here where it sort of just slowly fades with some occasional pumps back up to the upside just to get everyone excited, and then down into the end of the year, sort of something like that, and then pop back up, right? It could do something like that where it puts in a low, it puts in a high, and then sweeps the high, and then sweeps the low. That way, by the end of the pre-halving year, both the Bulls and the Bears are sufficiently wrecked, right? Then you went through the whole year, and both sides thought they were right for the whole year, but they were really right for only half the year. And the other side was right for the other half of the year. But by the end of the year, everyone's wrecked, right? Everyone who was, leveraged long or leveraged short, especially at the wrong time, right? They just get wiped out. So then you go into the halving year, and the cryptoverse is more or less fully reset. So that's my expectation for ETH. Lower highs, lower lows for the rest of the year. And we'll sort of take inventory on the situation come December. We'll see if Ethereum is finally made at home by that time, and if it has, then we'll have to provide a welcome party for it. If not, then we'll continue waiting out in the cold for it to come back home. Anyways, I don't really think I have anything else for you guys in this video. Although maybe a couple more things. I do want to at least mention the ETH dominance. The ETH dominance is an interesting chart because I believe, like a lot of people point out, that Bitcoin dominance is putting in lower highs. Everyone loves to point that out, and I love to point out that it is true. And we must be aware that dominance of Bitcoin is putting in lower highs. That is why I'm not calling for 80%. I'm calling for 60%. Like, I think it's often mischaracterized. But the dominance is putting in lower highs. It's also putting in higher lows, right? Higher lows. A lot of people don't like talking about that for some reason, but it is higher lows. What if ETH dominance does the same thing? You think ETH is immune to the idea of all these other cryptocurrencies, coming to fruition and sort of slowly taking market share? Probably not. And ETH dominance has also been putting in lower highs. Back in 2017, dominance was at like 20, is at 31% almost. Then in 2018, it hit 26% or so. Then in 2021, it was at 22%. Then here in later 2022, it was at 21%. Then in June, it hit 20% or almost about 21% again, just below 21%. But these are all lower highs, right? These are all lower highs, right? This high over here was 21.19. This high over here was 20.83. And you can kind of see that dominance actually recently put in a lower low. But if ETH dominance is putting in lower highs, does that mean it's putting in higher lows? If you connect these dots, and sort of draw it out, perhaps the next low on ETH dominance is around 10%. 10% or so. So maybe it just slowly fades back down this way and then bounces back up here. And then goes up to say 18% by by 2026 or something. So I think you need to look at ETH dominance. And then I think, of course, there's the Ether Bitcoin valuation, which is everyone's favorite topic. It's currently coming in at 0.06307. But all I see And the same thing, right? And the same thing with Bitcoin, and the same thing with ETH, right? All I see are lower highs and lower lows. And it's like, it's not cool to say it, right? Because everyone's like, well, you just got to wait for the wedge to break, right? But it still has just been lower highs and lower lows. And, previously, during the consolidation after a new low, Ether Bitcoin actually got some move back up to the upside. This time we didn't really get that. I mean, to me, we put in a new low and then Ether Bitcoin has just gone sideways. That seems kind of weak, does it not? Especially compared to the prior moves after putting in new lows. Right after putting in this low, we got a nice rally. After putting in this low, Ether got a nice rally on its Bitcoin pair. After putting in this low, it didn't. It's just gone sideways since June. So, what if we just wake up one morning and Ether Bitcoin is just breaking down this way? One way that it could happen is that Ether sells off with Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin, gets some type of relief rally, and then there's not as strong of a bid for Ether, and therefore Ether Bitcoin goes down, whether Bitcoin goes up or down, which is normally what happens when Bitcoin's below the 20-week SMA, especially in the pre-halving year. So I would look for Ether Bitcoin to go down, not only on drops by Bitcoin, but also by drops or also by moves up by Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin's going back up to test the 20-week, then I would still expect Ether Bitcoin to take a hit. And I mean, I get it. I mean, I know that I know that the bears are not really happy with this price action, but the bulls aren't either. And so I mean, I still think that it's just a series of lower highs and lower lows, and that eventually we're going to come back down and at the very least revisit these lows. I think Ether will likely go below 0.049. I mean, I think it's going to go to 0.03 to 0.04 before this is all said and done. And it could look something like this, where it sort of like breaks down, back up, and then down like that. Could do something like that. But again, I mean, admittedly, it's taking longer than I thought it would. And I thought it would have already broken down a while back. Hasn't broken back up, at least, but it is certainly taking a long time. Anyways, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think you guys sort of understand my views on the market. I mean, it should not be a surprise at this point, right? Guys, this is just what happens in the pre-halving year, right? We spend half the year going up, half the year going down. When you go half up for the first half of the year, everyone calls for new highs. They see this time is different, and that all the OGs who are calling for for a pullback and stuff because they've seen it 3 times before. These guys don't know what they're talking about. And then we get back in the second half of the pre-halving year, and then same thing happens every single time, without fail, every single time. The S&P gets a correction in August or September of the pre-election year. It knocks Bitcoin into a downtrend for the rest of the year, even if the S&P goes back up. And then crypto just gets hit. And the reason why crypto will eventually come back will be when QE returns. And maybe slightly before. But crypto is dependent on that excess liquidity, much more so than the stock market. The problem is the Fed has no incentive to pivot when the stock market, is at 4,400. If the stock market were a lot lower, the Fed would have a reason to pivot, but they're not going to pivot because your cryptocurrency is dropping. So that's where we are, okay? I think that my guess is that Ethereum will end the year below its yearly open. And if not, maybe slightly above it. But my base case is that it's below it. If that's wrong, then I would still say, all right, it still likely goes down. It would just maybe not as much. Lower highs, lower lows for the end of the year. And we'll take inventory on where we are by the end of the year. And we'll wrap it up there. Hope you guys enjoyed the cheery video. Anyways, we'll see you guys next time. Make sure you subscribe. If you're not subscribed, give the video a thumbs up. And again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Bye.